The wind howled like a wounded animal across the frozen plains of Wyoming territory, driving sheets of snow sideways through the December air. Ethan Cole pulled his worn coat tighter around his shoulders and squinted through the white blur, trying to make out the trail ahead. His horse, a sturdy bay named Buck, snorted and shook his head against the icy assault, but kept moving forward with the steady determination of a mount that had weathered many storms. The leather pouch at Ethan's side felt heavier than its actual weight. 3 months of cattle driving had finally paid off, enough gold coins to see him through the winter and maybe, just maybe, buy that extra parcel of land come spring. Old man Henderson had been fair in his dealings, counting out each coin with gnarled fingers while warning Ethan about the coming storm. "You'd best hurry back, boy," Henderson had said, his weathered face creased with concern. "This one's gonna be a killer." Ethan had thought he could beat it home. Now, 4 hours into what should have been a 6-hour ride, he wasn't so sure. The familiar landmarks had vanished beneath the snow, and even Buck seemed uncertain, his ears swiveling nervously as he picked his way through the deepening drifts. It was then that Ethan saw it, a flash of white against white, different somehow from the swirling snow. He pulled Buck to a halt and peered through the storm. There, huddled against a broken fence post where the old Matherson property bordered the trail, was a figure, too small to be a man, too still to be an animal. "Hello?" His voice was snatched away by the wind before it could travel 10 feet. He urged Buck closer, and as they approached, the figure resolved into something that made his breath catch. A woman? No, barely more than a girl, though the wedding dress she wore suggested otherwise. The once white silk was torn and muddied, hanging in tatters around her slight frame. She had wrapped her arms around herself, her head bowed against the storm, dark hair whipping around her face like black ribbons. Her hands, clutching at the thin fabric, were the purple blue of fresh bruises or frostbite. Ethan swung down from Buck before he'd even made a conscious decision to do so. His boots sank into knee-deep snow as he struggled toward her. Miss, can you hear me?" Her head lifted slowly, as if the motion cost her great effort. The face that looked up at him was young, maybe 20, if that, with high cheekbones and full lips turned nearly blue with cold. But it was her eyes that stopped him short. Large and dark, they held a mixture of desperate hope and bone-deep wariness, like a wild animal deciding whether to trust or flee. "Please." The word was barely a whisper, her voice cracked and raw. I can't go back." Ethan glanced around instinctively, but there was nothing to see but snow and more snow. No pursuing riders, no sign of where she'd come from. Just this slip of a girl in a ruined wedding dress, looking like she'd walked straight out of a fever dream. "We need to get you warm," he said, already shrugging out of his coat. The cold bit through his shirt immediately, but he ignored it, wrapping the heavy wool around her shoulders. She was shaking so hard he could hear her teeth chattering even over the wind. "Can you stand?" She tried, bless her, but her legs buckled before she'd risen more than a few inches. Without thinking, Ethan scooped her up. She weighed next to nothing, light as a bird in his arms. Through the coat and the wet dress, he could feel how thin she was, all sharp bones and not much else. "No," she murmured against his chest, though her arms went around his neck instinctively. "You don't understand. He'll come. He'll find me." "Nobody's finding anyone in this storm," Ethan said grimly, carrying her to where Buck waited with the patience of a saint. The horse's eyes rolled slightly at the unexpected burden, but he stood firm as Ethan struggled to mount while holding the girl. It took some doing, but he managed to swing up into the saddle with her cradled across his lap. She curled into him like she was trying to disappear, her face buried in his shirt. He could feel her violent shivering through both their clothes. "What's your name?" he asked, nudging Buck into motion. He'd have to forget about making it home tonight. The old trapper's cabin was closer, maybe 2 miles if he could find it in this mess. It wasn't much, but it had walls and a fireplace, and right now that was all that mattered. "Lily?" she whispered. "Lily Mae Sullivan? No." A bitter laugh that was more sob than humor. "Lily Mae Carson now, I suppose, for all of 8 hours?" Ethan filed that information away, focusing on keeping Buck headed in what he hoped was the right direction. The storm was worsening, if such a thing was possible. He could barely see past Buck's ears now, and the cold was seeping through his shirt like icy fingers. "We're going to be okay," he said, as much to himself as to her. "There's a cabin not far. We'll get a fire going, get you warm." She stirred slightly. "Why? Why what? Why are you helping me? You don't know me. I have nothing. I can't pay you." The question surprised him. What kind of man would leave a woman to freeze to death in a snowstorm? But looking down at her face, at the way she watched him with those guarded eyes even as she shivered in his arms, he got the feeling she'd known too many men who would have done exactly that. "We don't need payment for basic human decency," he said roughly. She studied him for a long moment, then slowly relaxed against him. Not trust exactly, but something like acceptance. Or maybe she was just too cold and tired to maintain her guard. They rode in silence after that, Ethan straining to see any landmark through the white wall surrounding them. Once, he thought he heard something behind them, a shout, maybe, or just the wind playing tricks. Lily heard it too. She stiffened in his arms, her fingers clutching at his shirt. "Shh," he soothed, "just the storm." But he urged Buck to a faster pace anyway. By the time the dark shape of the cabin materialized through the snow, Ethan could barely feel his hands on the reins. Lily had gone quiet and still, too still. He half fell from the saddle in his haste, catching her as she slid down after him. Come on, now," he urged, supporting most of her weight as they stumbled to the door. "Just a little further." The cabin was as cold as a tomb, but at least it cut the wind. Ethan deposited Lily in the single chair by the fireplace and turned his attention to the stack of wood by the hearth. His numb fingers fumbled with the matches. But finally, blessedly, a flame caught. He fed it carefully, coaxing it to life while behind him came the soft chattering of teeth and the rustle of wet fabric. When he turned back, she had drawn her knees up to her chest, making herself as small as possible in the chair. The wedding dress pooled around her like spilled milk, and in the growing firelight, he could see things he'd missed before. The dress wasn't just torn, it had been expensive once, real silk with tiny pearls sewn along the bodice. A rich man's bride, then, and bruises. Now that the snow wasn't obscuring everything, he could see the dark marks on her upper arms, the shape of fingers pressed too hard into soft flesh. Older bruises, yellow-green at the edges, pecked out from beneath the newer ones. Ethan turned away, busying himself with his saddlebags. He had coffee, some jerky, hard biscuits, not much, but it would do. When he'd gotten the coffee pot settled on the hearth, he risked another look at her. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," he said carefully. "You'll catch your death." Fear flashed across her face, quick and sharp. I don't have anything else." Of course she didn't. She had nothing but that ruined dress and whatever had driven her out into a killing snowstorm on what should have been her wedding night. Ethan dug through his saddlebags again and pulled out a spare shirt and his old wool pants. They'd dwarf her, but they were clean and dry. "Here, I'll step outside." give you privacy. In the storm. I need to see to my horse anyway. Won't be but a few minutes. She took the clothes with trembling hands, looking at them like she'd never seen men's clothing before. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Ethan nodded and headed for the door, grabbing a rope from a peg on the wall. The storm hit him like a physical blow when he stepped outside, but he gritted his teeth and waded through the snow to where Buck stood miserably against the side of the cabin. Sorry, boy, he murmured, leading the horse around to the small lean-to attached to the back. It wasn't much shelter, but it was better than nothing. He unsaddled Buck quickly, his movements automatic despite his numb hands, and made sure the horse had access to the bit of hay stored there. When he figured he'd given her enough time, he fought his way back to the front door. He knocked. Ridiculous. Maybe. But it seemed right. Before entering, the wet wedding dress hung over the back of the chair like a ghost, and Lily sat curled up close to the fire, drowning in his clothes. The shirt hung past her knees, the pants pooled around her feet despite her attempt to roll up the legs. She looked impossibly young and fragile, but the violent shivering had stopped, and there was a bit of color returning to her cheeks. Better? He asked, moving to check the coffee. Yes. She watched him pour the dark liquid into 2 tin cups, accepting hers with both hands wrapped around it for warmth. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then softly, my husband. She stopped, swallowed hard. Mr. Carson has men who work for him. Rough men. They would have taken me back. For the reward. Reward? A bitter smile touched her lips. Oh yes, I'm quite valuable. You see, a significant investment. He called me, like a prize heifer or a good hunting dog. Ethan felt his jaw clench, but he kept his voice neutral. How long were you out in that storm? I don't know. Hours, maybe. I left just after midnight when he finally... She trailed off, staring into her coffee. I thought I could make it to town. Find someone heading east, maybe. Offer to work for passage. But the storm came up so fast and I got turned around, and then I couldn't feel my feet anymore, so I just stopped. Where did you come from? The Carson place is 15 miles east of here. Her eyes widened slightly. You know him? Know of him. Cattle baron owns half the county, not a man I'd choose to cross. She laughed again, that broken sound. No. Not a man anyone would choose to cross, but I didn't choose anything. Mr. Cole, Ethan Cole. Mr. Cole. She tested the name carefully. I didn't choose anything. My father did that for me, sold me off like livestock to pay his debts. And tonight, my wedding night, I found out exactly what kind of man I'd been sold to. The fire crackled between them. Outside, the wind screamed around the corners of the cabin like something alive and angry. Ethan sipped his coffee and waited. In his experience, people talked when they were ready, not before. He has plans for me, she said finally. Grand plans. I'm to be shown off at his business gatherings, dressed up pretty and paraded around to help him make deals. And after... She shuddered. He was very detailed about the after, about how I'd earn my keep. Ethan's hand tightened on his cup, but he still said nothing. So I ran. She looked up at him then, those dark eyes fierce despite the exhaustion. In my wedding dress, in a snowstorm, with nothing but the clothes on my back, because freezing to death seemed better than the alternative. And now, she looked around the tiny cabin, at the fire, at him. Now I don't know. You could take me back. claim the reward. I couldn't stop you. I could, Ethan agreed mildly, but I won't. Why? He considered the question, staring into the flame. Why indeed? The gold in his pouch would see him through, but more was always useful. And crossing a man like Carson came with risks, the kind that could leave a man shot in the back on a dark night. But then he looked at her. Really looked. At the bruises and the torn dress. Yes, but more than that. At the steel in her spine that had driven her into a killing storm rather than submit. At the way she held herself now. Chin up. Meeting his eyes directly despite having every reason to cower. Because I knew a girl once, he said finally. My sister. Married off at 16 to a man who... He stopped, old pain flickering across his face. She didn't run. Wish to God she had. Understanding dawned in Lily's eyes, and for the first time since he'd found her, something in her seemed to uncoil just a fraction. They sat in companionable silence after that, listening to the storm rage outside while the fire warmed the small space. Finally, Ethan rose and pulled a bedroll from his pack. You take the chair, he said, spreading the bedroll near the hearth. We'll figure out the rest come morning. I can't. You can and you will. Get some rest. You're safe tonight. She looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. As he settled onto the hard floor, he heard her quiet voice once more. Ethan? Yeah? Thank you for choosing to be decent. He stared up at the rough ceiling, thinking about choices, about the gold in his pouch and the girl in his chair, about storms and sisters and the kinds of men who thought they could own another person. You get some sleep, Lily May, he said softly. Outside, the storm howled on, but inside the little cabin for just this night, two strangers had found shelter from more than just the cold. The storm had blown itself out by morning, leaving behind a world transformed by white. Ethan woke to pale sunlight filtering through the frost-covered window and the sound of quiet movement. He lay still for a moment, orienting himself, the hard floor, the dying embers in the fireplace, and the events of the night before rushing back. Lily stood by the window, still drowning in his clothes, staring out at the snow-laden landscape. In the morning light, he could see things the darkness and storm had hidden. Her hair, now dry, fell in dark waves past her shoulders. She was prettier than he'd first thought, with delicate features that spoke of good breeding, but there was a hollow quality to her cheeks that suggested recent hardship. Morning, he said, sitting up with a groan. Every muscle protested the night on the floor. She turned, and he was struck again by those eyes, dark as coffee, holding depths he couldn't quite read. The storm's passed. So it has. He stood, working the kinks out of his back. How are you feeling? Alive, she said simply, which is more than I expected 12 hours ago. Ethan rebuilt the fire while she settled back in the chair, drawing her knees up like she had the night before. It seemed to be her way of making herself smaller, less noticeable. He wondered how long she'd been practicing that particular skill. My place isn't far, he said, setting the coffee pot to heat. Maybe 3 hours ride in good weather. It's not much, just a small ranch house and a barn, but it's warm and there's food. She watched him warily. And then we figure out your next move. You mentioned heading east? I have an aunt in Chicago, my mother's sister. She wrote once that if I ever needed... Lily trailed off, plucking at the too long sleeves of his shirt. But I have no money for passage. Nothing to sell except... Her hand went to her throat, where a thin gold chain disappeared beneath the collar. Except this. And it was my mother's. Keep it, Ethan said roughly. We'll work something out. She studied him with that direct gaze that seemed at odds with her fragile appearance. "Why are you doing this? Really?" He poured coffee, buying time. How to explain the impulse that had made him scoop her up instead of riding past? How to tell her about Sarah, cold in the ground these 10 years, bruises hidden beneath her Sunday dress? "Let's just say I've got my reasons and leave it at that." She nodded slowly, accepting his evasion. They drank their coffee in silence, gnawing on the hard biscuits he'd produced from his pack. Not much of a breakfast, but better than nothing. When they'd finished, Ethan went to Saddlebuck while Lily gathered her wedding dress. She held it at arm's length, staring at the ruined silk with an unreadable expression. "Leave it," he suggested. "No point hauling that around." "Evidence," she said quietly. "He'll say I stole it, add theft to abandonment." But she folded it carefully anyway, wrapping it in itself until it was just a white bundle. The ride to Ethan's ranch was slow going. The snow came up to Buck's chest in places, and with 2 riders. The horse had to work for every step. Lily rode behind Ethan, her arms around his waist, her cheek pressed against his back. He could feel her tense every time they passed a stand of trees or crested a rise, expecting pursuit. "He won't come himself," she said once, so quietly he almost missed it. "He'll send others. Mr. Carson doesn't like to get his hands dirty." "How many men does he have?" "At the main house, 20, maybe more, plus the line riders and ranch hands. But only a few he'd trust with this. His foreman, Bill Torrance, maybe 1 or 2 others." Ethan filed the information away. He knew Torrance by reputation, a hard man who'd killed more than once, always just inside the law. Not someone he wanted showing up at his door. They were within sight of his ranch when Lily spoke again. "That's your place?" He followed her gaze to the small collection of buildings nestled in the valley below. It wasn't much compared to the Carson spread, a 2-room house with a lean-to kitchen, a barn that needed new boards, a corral that held a dozen horses on a good day. But it was his, every board and nail, built with his own hands and paid for with his own sweat. "It's not fancy," he said, suddenly aware of how it must look to someone used to finer things. "It's perfect," she breathed, and something in her voice made him believe she meant it. They rode into the yard, and Ethan's old hound, Moses, came loping out to greet them, tail wagging. The dog stopped short at the sight of a stranger, hackles rising slightly. "Easy, boy," Ethan soothed. "She's a friend." Lily slid down from Buck and stood very still, letting Moses approach at his own pace. When the dog finally came close enough, she held out her hand for him to sniff, within moments. Moses was leaning against her legs, tail wagging again. "He doesn't usually take to strangers," Ethan observed, dismounting. "Animals know who to trust," she said simply, scratching behind Moses' ears. Ethan led Buck to the barn, Lily trailing behind. She helped without being asked, holding the horse steady while he removed the saddle, fetching water from the trough. Her movements were careful, deliberate, like someone who'd learned to be useful without being noticed. Inside the house, he stoked the banked fire in the stove and put water on to heat. The place was simple but clean. He'd always been particular about that. A table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed in one corner, shelves holding a few books and his mother's china. The second room held supplies and gear, plus a cot for the occasional hired hand. Lily stood in the middle of the main room, taking it all in. "You live alone?" "He have for 6 years now, since my partner decided California gold was more interesting than Wyoming cattle. Don't you get lonely?" He shrugged. "Got the horses, Moses, the Hendersons are good neighbors, only 5 miles north. Town's a day's ride when I need supplies." He paused, studying her. "What about you? What was it like, living at the Carson place. Her face closed off, like living in a very pretty cage. Everything perfect on the outside, silver and crystal and servants to wait on you. But underneath, she shuddered. I was there a month before the wedding, a month of him watching me, touching me when no one was looking, reminding me that I'd been bought and paid for. Ethan's hands clenched involuntarily. Your father is a weak man who loves cards more than his daughter. The bitterness in her voice could have curdled milk. He lost everything to Mr. Carson in a poker game. The house, the land, everything. Then Mr. Carson offered him a way out. All debts cleared in exchange for me. That's not legal. You can't. Can't you? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. When you're rich enough, powerful enough, you can do whatever you want. Who was going to stop him? The sheriff who drinks at his table? The judge who owes him money? The water had heated, and Ethan poured it into a basin. Here, you can wash up. I'll see about some proper food. He busied himself at the stove, frying bacon and eggs, slicing bread. Behind him, he could hear the splash of water, the soft rustle of fabric. When he turned with the loaded plates, she was sitting at the table, face scrubbed clean, hair pulled back with a piece of string she'd found somewhere. This is too much, she protested as he set the plate before her. When's the last time you ate a real meal? She had to think about it. The wedding breakfast, I suppose, though I couldn't manage much. Then eat. She did, slowly at first, then with increasing appetite. Ethan watched her over his own plate, noting the careful way she cut her food, the straight-backed posture even in his rough kitchen. Breeding showed, even dressed in men's clothes in a ranch house. I can work, she said suddenly. I know I don't look like much, but I can cook and clean and mend. I can tend chickens, work a garden. I won't be a burden while I figure out how to get to Chicago. I didn't say you were a burden. No, but she set down her fork, meeting his eyes. I need to earn my keep. I won't be beholden to anyone again. Not ever. He heard the steel in her voice, the determination that had driven her into a blizzard rather than submit. Fair enough. Though I warn you, I'm a terrible patient when it comes to mending. Got a whole pile of shirts with holes in them. That earned him a small smile, the first he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, hinting at the girl she might have been before life had hardened her. They were finishing the meal when Moses started barking outside. Not his friendly bark, but the sharp, aggressive sound he made when strangers approached. Lily went rigid, the color draining from her face. Easy, Ethan said, rising slowly. He moved to the window, peering out carefully. A lone rider was coming down the trail, moving cautiously through the snow. Not someone he recognized, but the man rode with the easy confidence of someone used to being in the saddle. As he got closer, Ethan could make out more details. Heavy coat, gun on his hip, face weathered by sun and wind. Stay inside, he told Lily, checking his own gun before stepping onto the porch. The rider stopped a respectful distance from the house, hands visible on the saddle horn. Morning, he called. Sorry to trouble you, I'm looking for someone. That's so? Ethan kept his voice neutral, his hand casual but near his gun. Young woman, dark hair, about 20. Might be dressed unusual for the weather. There's concern she got caught in that storm last night. Haven't seen anyone like that. The lie came easily. Storm was something fierce. Hope she found shelter. The man's eyes swept the yard, taking in the house, the barn, the smoke rising from the chimney. Mind if I water my horse? Been riding since dawn. Trough's there. Ethan gestured, watching as the man dismounted and led his horse over. He was looking around the whole time, noting details. His eyes lingered on the tracks leading from the barn to the house, two sets of footprints where there should be one. "Are you running this place alone?" the man asked conversationally. "That's right. I must get lonesome, especially in winter. I manage." The rider finished watering his horse and swung back into the saddle. "Well, if you do see a young woman, dark hair, pretty thing, there's folks worried about her. Mr. Carson especially. She's not well, needs looking after. I'll keep an eye out." "You do that." The man touched his hat brim. "Name's Torrance, by the way. Bill Torrance. I ride for the Carson brand." "Ethan Cole." "Hi, Cole." Torrance seemed to taste the name. "I'll remember that. Good day to you." He rode off the way he'd come, but Ethan stayed on the porch until horse and rider were just a speck in the distance. Only then did he go back inside. Lily stood pressed against the wall beside the window, trembling. That was him. Carson's foreman, the one who... She stopped, wrapping her arms around herself. He's gone. For now, but he saw the tracks. He knows someone else is here. Ethan couldn't deny it. Torrance might have ridden off, but he'd be back. Men like that didn't give up easy, especially when their boss's property was at stake. And that's how Carson would see it. Lily was property that had been stolen from him. "We need to get you out of here," he said. "Soon." "How?" "The stage doesn't run in winter. Even if it did, he'll have men watching the depot." She was right. The mountain passes would be closed until spring. The stage lines shut down. Even if he could get her to the railroad, Carson would have telegraphed ahead, put out word. A young woman traveling alone would be noticed, questioned, detained. "There might be another way," he said slowly, an idea forming. "The Hendersons are good people. They might..." "No." Her voice was firm. "I won't put anyone else at risk. You've done enough. More than enough. I'll leave tonight. Head south. Maybe. Find somewhere. You'll freeze before you make it 10 miles. That's not your problem." "I'm making it my problem." They stared at each other across the kitchen. Stubborn meeting, stubborn. Finally, Lily sank into a chair, the fight going out of her. "Why?" she asked again. "Why do you care what happens to me?" This time he answered honestly. "Because I couldn't save my sister. Because men like Carson think they can own people, buy and sell them like cattle. Because you were brave enough to run, and that ought to count for something." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. But when they come back, and they will come back, I won't let you get hurt for me. I mean that. Let me worry about that." But as he looked out the window at the pristine snow, he knew she was right. Torrance would be back, and probably not alone. The question was how long they had, and what he was willing to risk for a woman he'd known less than a day. Looking at her sitting at his table, lost in his clothes but with her chin up and her eyes fierce, he realized he already knew the answer. He'd risk everything. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of Wyoming day that made the snow sparkle like diamonds and burned your lungs with each breath. Ethan had barely slept, keeping one ear tuned for the sound of approaching horses. But the night had passed quietly, with only the settling of the house and Moses' occasional snuffles breaking the silence. He found Lily already awake, standing at the stove trying to coax life from the embers. She'd braided her hair and rolled the sleeves of his shirt up past her elbows, revealing more of those fading bruises that made his jaw clench. "I can do that," he offered. "I told you I'd earn my keep." She didn't look at him, concentrating on the kindling. "Besides, you need to tend your stock. I heard the horses calling." She was right. His small remuda would be hungry after the storm, and the water troughs would need breaking clear of ice. There's supplies in the pantry. Make whatever you can find. Ethan, she finally looked up. Be careful out there. He nodded and headed for the barn, rifle in hand. The morning chores were routine. Feed for the horses, ice broken, stalls mucked, but he found himself hurrying through them, uneasy about leaving her alone too long. When he returned to the house, the smell of frying bacon and fresh biscuits greeted him. Lily had transformed his meager supplies into a proper breakfast, and there was even coffee brewing strong and black the way he liked it. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" he asked, settling at the table. "My mother before she died, then the kitchen staff at home, when father wasn't paying attention. Ladies weren't supposed to know such things, but I liked being useful." She set a plate before him. "Mr. Carson had a French chef. Said my cooking skills wouldn't be needed." "His loss," Ethan said, biting into a biscuit that was light as air. They ate in companionable silence until Moses started his warning bark again. This time, Ethan was ready. He moved to the window, rifle in hand, then relaxed slightly. "It's all right. That's Sam Henderson's wagon." Lily tensed anyway, shrinking back from the window. He understood her fear. Every stranger was a potential threat now. Sam Henderson was a bear of a man with graying hair and kind eyes. One of the few neighbors Ethan counted as a true friend. He climbed down from the wagon slowly, favoring his bad knee. "Ethan, heard you might have weathered that storm away from home. Martha sent me to check you hadn't frozen to death." Ethan stepped onto the porch. "I'm fine, Sam. Got caught out but found shelter." Good, good." Sam's eyes drifted to the window where a shadow moved. "Martha also sent provisions. Said you'd be running low after being gone so long." There was something in Sam's tone, a careful neutrality that said he knew more than he was letting on. Ethan made a decision. "Come in for coffee, Sam. There's someone I'd like you to meet." Inside, Lily stood by the stove like a deer ready to bolt. Sam took off his hat, nodding politely. Ma'am." "Sam, this is Lily. Lily. Sam Henderson. He and his wife Martha have the ranch north of here." "Pleased to meet you," Lily said softly. Sam's eyes took in her appearance, the men's clothes, the bruises, the wariness, but his expression remained kindly neutral. "Likewise, miss. That coffee smells mighty good." As Lily poured, Sam settled his bulk at the table. "Had a visitor this morning, Bill Torrance, asking about a young woman who went missing in the storm. Seemed real concerned." Ethan met his friend's eyes. "That so?" "Mm-hmm. Told him I hadn't seen anyone. Martha did the same. Funny thing, though, he didn't seem to believe us. Said Mr. Carson was offering a substantial reward for information." "How substantial?" Ethan asked, though he could guess. $1,000 in gold?" Lily's cup clattered against the saucer. $1,000 was more than most men saw in 5 years of hard work. "That's a lot of money," Ethan said carefully. "It is." Sam sipped his coffee. "Course, Martha and I never did like Carson much. Man thinks he owns the whole valley, thinks he can buy anything or anyone." His eyes met Lily's briefly. "We don't hold with that kind of thinking." The relief on Lily's face was painful to see. "Thank you," she whispered. "Nothing to thank me for. Haven't seen you, have I?" Sam winked, then grew serious. "But Torrance isn't giving up. He was heading to town when he left our place. Likely putting the word out, getting more men." "We need to move her," Ethan said, "but the passes are closed, and the stage won't run for months, and Carson'll have men watching it anyway." Sam stroked his beard thoughtfully. "But there might be another way. You know my nephew, Tom. He's heading to Denver tomorrow with a load of furniture his daddy made. Plans to sell it and bring back supplies before the next big storm. Ethan's pulse quickened. Denver's got trains running east. It does. And Tom's a good boy, knows how to keep his mouth shut. Plus, his wagon's got a false bottom for valuables. Wouldn't be comfortable, but it'd be hidden. I couldn't ask, Lily began. You're not asking, I'm offering. Sam's voice was firm. Martha and I had a daughter once, about your age when the fever took her. She was strong-willed too. Wouldn't have stood for being bought and sold like property. Lily's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I don't know how to thank you. Just live free, that'll be thanks enough. Sam stood, settling his hat back on his head. Tom'll be by around dawn tomorrow. Best be ready. After Sam left, Ethan found Lily standing at the window, watching the wagon disappear into the distance. There are good people in the world, she said softly, like she was reminding herself, more than you might think. She turned to him. But Carson won't just let this go. Even after I'm gone, he'll make trouble for you, for the Hendersons. Let him try. Ethan's voice was harder than he intended. Sam Henderson's been in this valley longer than Carson. He's got friends, respect. And me? I don't have much Carson could take. Your life, she said quietly. He could take that. He could try, Ethan repeated. They spent the rest of the day in preparation. Ethan gathered what money he had. Not much after buying supplies, but enough for stage fare from Denver. Lily mended a pair of his old trousers to fit her better, her needle flying with practiced ease. You'll need a story, he said as she worked, for the journey. I've been thinking about that. I'll be a widow, heading east to live with family. That explains traveling alone, and most folks won't ask questions of a grieving woman. Your wedding ring, I'll turn it around so only the band shows. She held up her hand, demonstrating. See? Just another sad story heading east. As evening fell, they shared a simple supper. Lily had made stew from the provisions Sam brought, and the kitchen felt warm and homey in a way it hadn't in years. Moses lay at her feet, devoted already, and Ethan found himself wishing. But no. Wishes were dangerous things, and she needed to leave, needed to be safe. That was what mattered. I should pack, she said when the dishes were done. Not much to pack. No, she smiled ruefully. I suppose not. Just your clothes and my mother's necklace. Oh, and this. She pulled out the wedding dress, still folded into its compact bundle. Evidence, remember? Why keep it? It can only bring bad memories. She was quiet for a moment, running her hand over the stained silk. Maybe. But it's also proof that I survived, that I was brave enough to run. Someday, when I'm safe and settled, I might need to remember that. They sat by the fire as darkness fell, not talking much. There didn't seem to be words for this strange situation. Two people who were little more than strangers, yet bound by circumstance and a shared belief in what was right. Will you rebuild? She asked suddenly. After Carson makes trouble? Nothing to rebuild. This place isn't much, but it's solid. That's not what I meant. She looked at him across the flames. Will you trust again? After helping me brings you grief? He considered the question. Yes. Just like that? Just like that. Otherwise, men like Carson win when they make us small and scared and alone. I won't live that way. She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes. Ethan Cole, you're a rare man. Just stubborn. That too. When it came time to sleep, he insisted she take the bed again. Last night in a real bed for a while. Might as well enjoy it. She stood beside the bed, looking uncertain. Ethan, would you... That is, would you mind staying close? Not, I don't mean just, I keep thinking I hear horses. He understood. The fear was bone deep now, would be for a long time. I'll put my bedroll by the door. Anyone comes through, they'll have to go through me first. Thank you. He settled on the floor, rifle within reach. The house grew quiet except for the pop of the dying fire and Moses' gentle snoring. He was nearly asleep when her voice drifted through the darkness. I'll write when I'm safe in Chicago and let you know I made it. I'd like that. And if you ever come east, I'll look you up. More silence, then. Do you think I'm doing the right thing running? I think you're doing the only thing. That's not always the same as right, but sometimes it's all we've got. He'll tell people I'm mad, that I need to be locked away for my own good. He let him. You'll be 1,000 miles away living your life. That's the best revenge there is. He heard her turn in the bed, settling deeper. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Lily Mae. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Tom Henderson might be delayed. Carson's men might come. 100 things could go wrong. But tonight, she was safe and warm and had hope for the first time in who knew how long. It was enough, as sleep finally took him. Ethan thought he heard her whisper something else, so soft it might have been the wind. But it sounded like, thank you. He smiled in the darkness. No thanks needed. Sometimes a man just knew what was right, and devil take the consequences. Tomorrow could bring what it would. Tonight, he'd kept faith with his sister's memory and his own conscience. For now, that was everything. The night seemed darker than usual, clouds obscuring the stars and moon. Ethan dozed fitfully by the door, jerking awake at every sound, the settling of wood, the whisper of wind, Moses shifting in his sleep. Somewhere past midnight, he heard it, the soft nicker of a horse that wasn't his. He was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. A glance at the bed showed Lily sitting up, her face pale in the darkness. Stay down, he whispered, moving to the window. 3 riders sat motionless at the edge of his property, dark shapes against the snow. They weren't trying to hide, which somehow made it worse. As he watched, one rider dismounted and walked toward the house with deliberate steps. Cole, the voice carried clearly in the still air. Ethan Cole, like to have a word. He recognized the voice, Jack Brennan, another of Carson's men. Not as dangerous as Torrance, but mean enough when he had backing. Kinda late for social calls, Ethan called back through the door. Mr. Carson doesn't sleep when his property goes missing. Neither do we. Don't know anything about missing property? Come now, Cole. Torrance saw the tracks, where 2 sets of footprints when your wagon's still here, so you didn't go to town. Means someone's in there with you. Ethan said nothing. Mind racing. 3 men, possibly more out in the darkness. He was a fair shot, but fair wouldn't cut it against those odds. Here's the thing, Brennan continued closer now. Mr. Carson's a reasonable man. He understands you probably found the girl half frozen, brought her in out of Christian charity. No harm in that, but she's not well. Cole, touched in the head, needs proper care. Behind him, Ethan heard Lily's sharp intake of breath. So here's what we'll do, Brennan went on. You send her out, we take her home where she belongs, and everyone forgets this happened. No hard feelings. Hell, might even be a reward in it for you. And if I don't have any girl here, then you won't mind us coming in to warm up by your fire. Have a look around. Ethan weighed his options, fight and likely die. Let them in, and Lily was finished. He needed time, needed them to believe he might cooperate. Give me a minute, he called. Let me get dressed proper. 2 minutes, Cole. Then we come in anyway. Ethan moved swiftly to the bed. The root cellar, he whispered urgently. Under the kitchen rug. Get in there and don't come out no matter what you hear. Ethan. Go, now. She slipped out of bed, barefoot and silent. He heard the soft scrape of the rug being moved, the creak of the cellar door. Then nothing. He pulled on his boots and coat, checking his rifle one more time. When he opened the door, Brennan stood 10 feet away, hand resting on his pistol. The other 2 riders had moved closer but stayed mounted. That's far enough, Ethan said, rifle held loose but ready. No need for unfriendliness, just want to collect what belongs to Mr. Carson. Already told Torrance, haven't seen any girl. Brennan smiled, an ugly expression in the lamplight spilling from the doorway. Now see, that's interesting because I didn't say anything about a girl. Just missing property. Damn. Ethan kept his face neutral, but inside he cursed his mistake. Torrance mentioned he was looking for someone. Figured that's what you meant. Could be. Or could be you're hiding her. Brennan's eyes flicked past Ethan to the house interior. Mind if we verify that? Peaceable-like. I do mind, man's home is private. Even from the law. Brennan pulled back his coat to reveal a deputy's badge. Did I mention Sheriff Watson deputized us? Makes this official business. Ethan's heart sank. Watson was deep in Carson's pocket. Everyone knew it. But a badge gave them legal cover for whatever they did here. Let me see the warrant, he said, stalling. Don't need one when we're in pursuit of a fugitive. See, Mrs. Carson, that's what she is, legal and proper. She took some valuable items when she left. Jewelry, money. That makes her a thief. Funny how she became a thief after she ran off. Brennan's smile widened. Funny how things work out sometimes. Now you stepping aside, or do we do this the hard way? Before Ethan could answer, Moses erupted into barking from inside the house, not his warning bark, his excited greeting. A moment later, the dog shot past Ethan and bounded through the snow toward the road. Tom Henderson's wagon rolled into view, 2 hours early and saving Ethan from making a choice that had no good options. Tom pulled up near the house, Moses dancing around the horse's feet. Morning, Mr. Cole, Tom called cheerfully. He was a younger version of his uncle, broad and honest-faced. Uncle Sam said you had some furniture needed hauling to Denver. Thought I'd get an early start. Brennan's eyes narrowed. Kind of early for business, isn't it? Early bird and all that, Tom replied, his cheerful tone not quite masking his awareness of the tension. Something wrong here? Your deputy business, Brennan said curtly. We're looking for a woman, dark hair, about 20. Might be confused, might spin tales. You seen anyone like that? Can't say I have. Tom climbed down from the wagon, stretching. Though I did hear in town that Mr. Carson's new bride went missing. Terrible thing. Hope she's found safe. We all do, Brennan said, but his attention was back on Ethan. About that, look around. Tell you what, Ethan said, making a decision. Tom, why don't you come in for coffee while these gentlemen search the place? Want a witness to make sure nothing goes missing during their official business? Brennan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fair enough. They trooped inside, Brennan and his men spreading out through the small house. Ethan put coffee on, hands steady despite the knowledge that only thin floorboards separated the searchers from Lily. Tom sat at the table, understanding enough to keep quiet. The search was thorough but not destructive, yet. They checked the bedroom, the storage room, even looked up the chimney. One man went to check the barn while another poked through the lean-to kitchen. Satisfied? Ethan asked when they gathered back in the main room. There's fresh biscuits, one of the men said. Women's work. I made them. Ethan lied smoothly. Learned from my mother, man living alone needs to know how to feed himself. Brennan picked up one of the shirts Lily had mended, examining the neat stitches. "This your work, too? Mrs. Henderson does my mending sometimes. Neighborly thing. Convenient. All these explanations. Truth usually is." They stared at each other across the kitchen, tension thick enough to cut. Finally, Brennan set down the shirt. "She can't have gone far in that storm. We'll find her, and when we do, we'll remember who helped and who hindered." He touched his hat brim mockingly. "Good day, Mr. Cole Henderson." They filed out, mounting their horses with unhurried movements. Ethan and Tom stood on the porch, watching until they disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness. "They gone?" Tom asked quietly. "For now, but they'll be watching the roads." "Good thing we won't be on the roads then," Tom grinned. "Uncle Sam told me what's what, and where is she?" Ethan led him inside and pulled back the rug. Lily emerged from the root cellar like a ghost, covered in dirt and cobwebs, but safe. Her eyes went immediately to Tom, wary despite everything. "It's all right," Ethan assured her. "This is Tom Henderson. He's going to get you to Denver." "Ma'am," Tom touched his hat. "We should move quick, though they might circle back." While Tom prepared the wagon's hidden compartment, Ethan helped Lily gather her few belongings. She'd changed back into his spare clothes, the dress bundled under her arm. "It won't be comfortable," Tom warned, showing her the space beneath the false bottom. "But I've hauled delicate cargo before. I'll go easy as I can." "I've been uncomfortable before," Lily said. She turned to Ethan, and for a moment, neither spoke. "Thank you," she said finally, "for everything. I won't forget." "Nothing to forget. You get to Chicago, you make a life. That's all the thanks I need." She surprised him by stepping close and rising on her toes to kiss his cheek. "Maybe someday. When this is over. Maybe someday." She climbed into the wagon bed and folded herself into the hidden space. It was tight, but she fit. Tom arranged blankets around her for padding, then sealed the false bottom to any casual inspection. The wagon held only furniture. "I'll get her there safe," Tom promised, shaking Ethan's hand. "Count on it." "I am." Ethan watched the wagon roll away, Moses whining at his side. The sky was lightening in the east, painting the snow-covered mountains pink and gold. Somewhere out there, Brennan and his men were watching, waiting. But Tom knew the back trails, the old hunting paths. With luck and skill, they'd slip through. He went inside and sat at the table, suddenly exhausted. The coffee had gone cold, but he drank it anyway, staring at the chair where she'd sat just hours before. The house felt emptier than it had in years. An hour later, full daylight revealed riders on the horizon, watchers, making sure he didn't leave. Let them watch. The bird had already flown. He found the note when he went to clear the table. She'd written it on a scrap of brown paper, probably while he was talking to Brennan. "You asked if I thought I was doing right. Now I ask you the same. You risked everything for a stranger. Was it right? I think maybe right is just another word for necessary. Thank you for making my freedom necessary to you. L.M." Ethan read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it in his shirt pocket. Outside, the watchers maintained their vigil. Soon, Carson himself might come, full of threats and promises. Let him come. Ethan had made his choice, and he'd make it again. Some things mattered more than safety or gold or an easy life. Sometimes a man had to stand for what was necessary, even if it cost him. He poured fresh coffee and settled in to wait for whatever came next. The note crinkled softly in his pocket, a reminder that somewhere out there, a brave woman was rolling toward freedom in the false bottom of a wagon. It was enough, more than enough. It was necessary. 3 days passed in uneasy quiet. The watchers remained on the horizon, changing shifts but never leaving Ethan unobserved. He went about his business, tending horses, mending fences, acting like a man with nothing to hide. But at night, he lay awake wondering if Tom's wagon had made it through, if Lily was safely on a train heading east. On the 4th morning, the waiting ended. Ethan was mucking stalls when Moses erupted into frenzied barking. Through the barn door, he saw a procession approaching, 5 riders, with Richard Carson himself at the center. Ethan had seen Carson from a distance at cattle auctions and town meetings, but never up close. The man was older than expected, perhaps 50, with silver at his temples and the soft look of someone who paid others to do his hard work. But his eyes were sharp as flint, missing nothing as he surveyed Ethan's property. "Mr. Cole," Carson said, not bothering to dismount. "I believe we have business to discuss." "I can't think what that might be," Ethan replied, pitchfork still in hand. "No? Then let me refresh your memory." Carson pulled a folded paper from his coat. "This is a sworn statement from Mrs. Julia Carson. Perhaps you know her by her maiden name, Sullivan, stating that she was coerced and threatened into marriage, that I forced myself upon her, that she fled in fear for her life." Ethan kept his face neutral. "Don't know any Julia Carson." "She also claims," Carson continued as if Ethan hadn't spoken, "that a man named Ethan Cole helped her escape, harbored a fugitive, interfered with the lawful retrieval of my wife. It seems like if a woman's running in fear for her life, the law should protect her, not drag her back." Carson's smile was thin as winter ice. "The law protects property rights, Mr. Cole, and a wife is her husband's property, like it or not. Maybe that's changing." "Maybe, but not today." Carson leaned forward in his saddle. "Here's what puzzles me. By all accounts, you're a sensible man. Mind your business, work hard, keep to yourself. Yet you threw all that away for a girl you'd never met. Why?" Ethan met his gaze steadily. "Maybe I don't like seeing people treated like cattle. A noble, foolish, but noble." Carson straightened. "I could ruin you, you know. A word from me, and no one will buy your horses. The bank could call in your loans. Suppliers could refuse your custom. I could make your life very difficult." "You could try. I could do more than try." Carson's voice hardened. "But I'm a businessman, Mr. Cole. I believe in cutting losses. My wife has proven herself unsuitable, too headstrong, too much trouble. Perhaps I'm better off without her." Ethan said nothing, sensing a trap. "However," Carson continued, "there's the matter of theft. She took certain items when she left, personal correspondence, business papers, things that could be misinterpreted by those who don't understand commerce." Now they were getting to it. "Don't know anything about any papers." "Of course not. But if you did, if you happened to come across them, I'd be willing to pay handsomely for their return. Say, $5,000? The sum was staggering, more than Ethan could make in 10 years of honest work. Enough to buy more land, better stock, security for life. "That's a lot of money for some papers," he said carefully. "Sentimental value," Carson replied smoothly. "Letters from my dear mother, that sort of thing. Surely if such papers existed, if they'd been entrusted to you for safekeeping, you'd want them returned to their rightful owner?" Ethan understood now. Whatever Lily had taken, it was damaging enough that Carson would pay a fortune to get it back, which meant it was probably evidence of something that could destroy him if it reached the right hands. "Sorry I can't help you," Ethan said, "but like I keep telling your men, I haven't seen your wife." Carson's mask finally slipped, revealing the cruel man beneath. You're making a mistake, Cole. I offered you the easy way. Remember that. I'll try to keep it in mind. Boys, Carson said to his men, search the place, every board, every hay bale, find those papers. This search wasn't like Brennan's careful inspection. They tore through the barn, scattered his tack, emptied grain bins. In the house, they ripped open mattresses, pulled up floorboards, smashed furniture. Ethan stood in the yard, fists clenched, watching his home be destroyed. But they found nothing, because there was nothing to find. Whatever papers Lily had taken were with her, hidden in Tom Henderson's wagon, already miles away. When they finally gave up, Carson's face was mottled with rage. This isn't over, Cole. You've made an enemy today. I've got a feeling I made that enemy the night I pulled your wife out of a snowstorm instead of leaving her to freeze. Carson jerked his horse around without another word. The others followed, leaving Ethan standing in the wreckage of his home. He spent the rest of the day putting things right as best he could. The furniture could be repaired, the floorboards nailed back down. They'd killed 2 chickens in their search, whether from spite or carelessness. But the rest of his stock was unharmed. As evening fell, Sam Henderson arrived with his wagon. I heard Carson paid you a visit, Sam said, surveying the damage. Brought some supplies. Martha figured you might need them. They worked together in companionable silence, boarding up the broken windows, patching the worst of the damage. Finally, Sam asked the question Ethan had been expecting. Any word from Tom? Not yet. Could be another week before we know anything. Sam nodded. Carson came by our place too, offered me money for information. Martha ran him off with a shotgun. He chuckled at the memory. That woman never did suffer fools. They shared a simple supper. Then Sam headed home. Ethan sat by his repaired fire, trying not to worry. Tom was smart, careful. He'd get through. He had to. 2 weeks later, the letter came. Ethan had ridden to town for supplies, enduring the stares and whispers. Word had spread about his confrontation with Carson, and people didn't know whether to admire his courage or pity his foolishness. The postmaster handed him the envelope with obvious curiosity. From Denver, he said helpfully. Ethan pocketed it without comment and didn't open it until he was miles from town, alone on the prairie. Tom's handwriting was cramped but clear. A delivery complete. Package arrived safely and caught the eastbound as planned. Interesting traveling companion. Told me stories about her late husband who died tragically young. Very convincing. Had some trouble at Bitter Creek. 3 men asking questions. We took the old mining road instead. Longer but safer. Package never compromised. She asked me to tell you the sunrise was beautiful from the train window. Said you'd understand. Stay watchful. Carson's reach is long. T. Ethan read it 3 times, relief flooding through him. She'd made it. She was free. He burned the letter that night, watching the flames consume the evidence. But the important parts, safely and eastbound, and that bit about the sunrise, those he kept locked in memory. The next morning brought a new crisis. 3 of his best horses were gone, run off in the night. The fence had been cut clean through. There were no tracks to follow. Whoever did it knew their business. This was how it would be. Then, not direct confrontation, but a slow bleeding, harassment, theft, isolation. Carson couldn't prove Ethan had helped Lily, but he didn't need proof to make life miserable. Ethan repaired the fence and went looking for his horses. He found them eventually, scattered across 10 miles of range. One had a gash on its flank from barbed wire. Another was lame, having stepped wrong in its panicked flight. As he doctored the injured animals, he thought about Lily's question. Was it right? Looking at his damaged property, his wounded stock, his uncertain future. Some might say no. He'd risked everything for a stranger and would pay the price for months, maybe years to come. But then he remembered her face that night, fierce with desperate hope. Remembered her small figure disappearing into Tom's wagon, heading toward a freedom she'd bought with courage. Remembered the simple words of her note. "Thank you for making my freedom necessary to you." Yes, it was right as anything he'd ever done. That evening, another visitor arrived. Ethan tensed when he saw the rider approaching, then relaxed. It was Dr. Marcus Webb from town, a man he'd always respected. "Ethan," the doctor said, dismounting carefully. He was near 70, still spry but cautious. "Thought you should know. Had an interesting patient today. Bill Torrance. Seems he fell off his horse. Broke his arm pretty bad." "Sorry to hear it," Ethan said neutrally. "Funny thing, though. The break looked more like someone hit him with something. A piece of wood, maybe. And he had papers on him. Business documents belonging to Mr. Carson. Very interesting reading." Ethan kept his expression blank. "That's so?" "Indeed. Seems Mr. Carson's been shorting the army on beef contracts, selling them diseased cattle, pocketing the difference. The kind of thing that could land a man in federal prison." Dr. Webb's eyes twinkled. "Of course, being an upstanding citizen. I turned the papers over to the federal marshal when he came through this afternoon." "Of course. He thought you'd want to know. Also thought you'd want to know that Torrance, in his delirium from the pain, mentioned something about those papers being stolen by Mrs. Carson. Said she must have mailed them to someone before she disappeared. Maybe someone she trusted to do the right thing with them." Ethan's mind raced. Lily must have sent the papers before boarding the train, trusting they'd find their way to honest hands. "Smart girl. Interesting story," he said carefully. "Isn't it?" Dr. Webb mounted his horse again. "Take care, Ethan. I have a feeling Mr. Carson's going to have bigger problems than a runaway wife very soon." After the doctor left, Ethan stood in his yard, looking up at the stars just beginning to show. Somewhere far to the east, Lily was starting her new life, here in Wyoming. Her last gift was about to bring justice to the man who'd tried to own her. He smiled for the first time in weeks. She'd been right to take those papers, right to run, right to trust that someone would use them well, and he'd been right to help her, whatever the cost. The war with Carson wasn't over, might never truly be over. But now the man would be fighting on two fronts, and federal marshals were harder to buy than local sheriffs. Ethan went inside and picked up the piece of paper he'd been saving. He'd been composing a letter in his head for days, waiting for news that she was safe. Now he could finally write it. "A sunrise is beautiful here too. The packages you left for safekeeping found their proper home. The wolf may soon find himself in a trap of his own making. The house is quieter now. Even Moses misses your biscuits. But quiet isn't always bad. Sometimes it means peace. Live well, live free. That's all the thanks needed. E." He'd send it tomorrow, addressed to L.M. Sullivan in care of General Delivery, Chicago. Maybe it would find her. Maybe not. But he'd written it, and that was enough. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance. The sound was wild and free, and Ethan found himself smiling again. Some creatures were never meant to be caged. Thank God for the ones brave enough to run, and for the chances life gave to help them fly. The federal marshal arrived 2 weeks later with 3 deputies and a warrant for Richard Carson's arrest. Word spread through the valley like wildfire. The mighty Carson, brought low by government beef contracts and fraudulent dealings. But Carson wasn't at his ranch when they came calling. He'd fled in the night. Some said to Mexico, others to California. Ethan watched the drama unfold from a distance, keeping to his routine. But on a cold March morning, his isolation ended with the arrival of a familiar horse in his yard. Bill Torrance sat his mount carefully, his right arm still splinted. The man looked older, worn down, but his eyes held a different quality than before. Resignation, perhaps, or understanding. "Cole," he said by way of greeting. "Torrance." Ethan kept his rifle visible but not raised. "Surprised to see you here." "Imagine so." Torrance shifted in his saddle, wincing. "Mind if I get down? This thing aches something fierce in the cold." Ethan nodded, watching as the man dismounted awkwardly. Without the backing of Carson's authority, Torrance seemed smaller somehow. Just another aging cowboy with too many hard years behind him. "Come about the horses," Torrance said. "The ones that went missing from your place. Know something about that? It might be they'll turn up in your south pasture tomorrow morning. Might be whoever took them feels different about things now that Carson's gone." They stood in silence for a moment. Two men who'd been on opposite sides now finding themselves on uncertain ground. "Why?" Ethan asked finally. Torrance rubbed his jaw with his good hand. "Been thinking about that night I came here looking for her. The girl. Saw her, you know, peeking through your window when I was talking to you." Ethan tensed, but Torrance raised his hand peacefully. "Could have pushed it. Could have forced my way in, but something." He shook his head. 20 years I've worked for hard men, done hard things. Never questioned it. Job was a job. But that girl, she looked so scared, like a rabbit in a snare. So you left." "I left. Told Carson I hadn't seen anything definite. He didn't like it, but I stuck to it." Torrance's laugh was bitter. First time I ever lied to him. Felt strange. Felt right. "And the papers? The ones that ended up with the marshal?" Torrance touched his broken arm meaningfully. "Fell off my horse, clumsy of me. Papers must have scattered in the wind, blown right to the dock's door." Ethan understood. Must have been quite a fall. The worst. But sometimes a man needs his bell rung to see things clear. Torrance moved back to his horse. "Anyway, thought you should know about those horses. And thought you should know I'm leaving. Heading south, maybe Arizona. Too old for Wyoming winters." "Good luck to you." Torrance paused with one foot in the stirrup. "She make it safe? The girl?" "I don't know what girl you mean." "Course not." Torrance smiled, the first genuine expression Ethan had seen on his face. "But if you did know, you might tell her Bill Torrance is sorry for his part in her troubles. Might tell her some chains are harder to break than others. But it's never too late to try." He mounted and rode away without another word, leaving Ethan to ponder the strange turns life could take. That evening, as promised, his missing horses appeared in the south pasture, none the worse for their adventure. Among them was a mare he didn't recognize, a beautiful sorrel with white stockings, young and strong. There was no brand, no mark of ownership, but a note tucked into her halter. For the trouble caused, a man needs good stock to build a future. A friend. Spring came early that year, melting the snow and bringing the prairie to life. With Carson gone and his men scattered, the valley seemed to breathe easier. The Hendersons were frequent visitors, and slowly, other neighbors began to stop by as well. The story of Ethan's stand had transformed in the telling. He'd become something of a local hero, the man who'd faced down Carson and won. He didn't correct them, let them have their story. The truth that he'd simply helped a frightened woman escape was both simpler and more complicated than their version. On a warm April morning, He was breaking the sorrel mare to saddle when Sam Henderson arrived with the mail from town. "Letter for you," Sam said, grinning. "From Chicago." Ethan's heart jumped, but he took the letter casually, tucking it in his shirt. He wouldn't read it in front of Sam, wouldn't share this private thing. But Sam wasn't done. "Also got news. That federal case against Carson. He got caught trying to cross into Mexico. Trial's set for next month. Word is he'll get 10 years, maybe more." "The justice has a way of catching up," Ethan said. "That it does. Oh, and Martha wants you for Sunday dinner, says she won't take no for an answer." After Sam left, Ethan sat on his porch and opened the letter with careful hands. The writing was neater than before, more confident. "Dear E, your letter found me, as I hoped it would. I'm writing this from my aunt's parlor, where sunlight streams through lace curtains and the sound of carriages fills the street. Such a different world from Wyoming. Yet I find myself missing the wide skies and silence. The news about the wolf in his own trap reached even here. I cried when I heard, not from sadness, but from relief so profound it shook me. Thank you for ensuring those papers found their proper home. I found work at a dress shop. The owner, Mrs. Hartley, is teaching me the trade. I'm good with a needle, and she says I have an eye for color. It's honest work, and I'm grateful for it. I've even saved a little money. Imagine that. Me with my own money that no one can take. Some nights I wake thinking I hear horses or his voice calling. But then I remember your words. You're safe tonight. You gave me that. Not just the safety of that night, but the belief that safety was possible. I hope the sunrise continues beautiful where you are. I hope Moses is well and still devoted to everyone who feeds him. I hope you've repaired the damage my escape caused. Most of all, I hope you know that what you did mattered. Not just to me, but to the world. One person choosing decency over profit, courage over comfort, it ripples outward like stones in water. I've enclosed something that belongs to you more than me now. Ever grateful. L. Inside the envelope was a second piece of paper, a bank draft for $500. The amount staggered him. How had she managed to save so much so quickly? But the accompanying note explained, this was hidden in my mother's necklace, her secret escape fund that she never got to use. I want you to have it, not as payment, never that, but as investment. Build something good, something lasting. That's all the thanks I need. Ethan sat for a long time, holding the draft and thinking. $500 could buy more land, better breeding stock, security. But more than that, it was trust. She trusted him to use it well, to build something worthy of the sacrifice they'd both made. That night, he made a decision. Come morning, he'd ride to town and buy the Paulson place, 40 acres adjoining his land, with good water and grass. He'd expand slowly, carefully, building something solid and true. 3 days later, another visitor arrived, this time, U.S. Marshal James Durham himself. He was a tall, lean man with shrewd eyes and a reputation for fairness. "Mr. Cole," he said, accepting coffee at Ethan's table. "Wanted to thank you personally. Those papers you helped secure have done more than convict Carson. We've uncovered a whole network of fraud, government contracts, land deals, even some judge buying. You've done a real service. I didn't do anything but what was right. Sometimes that's the hardest thing of all." Durham sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "Carson's asking for a deal. Says he'll give evidence on others if we reduce his sentence. Part of that evidence concerns his wife, claims she was part of the scheme, that she stole from him." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's so?" That's what he says, but funny thing, we can't find any Julia Carson. No marriage certificate on file, no church records. For a legal wife, she's remarkably undocumented. Maybe Carson's lying. Maybe, Durham smiled slightly. Or maybe a brave woman was never legally married at all. Maybe her father's debts were paid with a promise that was never formalized. Makes her running away a bit different, legally speaking. Ethan kept his face neutral, but inside, relief flooded through him. If Lily had never been legally married, she was truly free. Anyway, Durham continued, thought you should know. Also thought you should know we won't be looking for any Julia Carson. Woman doesn't exist, far as the law's concerned. After the marshal left, Ethan walked out to the corral where the sorrel mare grazed. She came to him now, accepting the halter easily, trusting. Like all wild things, she'd simply needed patience and kindness to show her true nature. He thought about writing to Lily, telling her about the marshal's visit, about her legal freedom, but no. Let her build her new life unencumbered by the past. If she wanted to know, she'd ask. For now, it was enough that she was safe, working, saving money, watching sunlight through lace curtains. That evening, as he worked on plans for the new property, Moses at his feet and a future spread before him, Ethan reflected on the strange path that had led him here. One snowy night, one choice to help rather than turn away. And everything had changed. The gold in his pouch from that cattle drive was long spent, scattered to repair damage and buy supplies. But what he'd gained was worth more than gold. The knowledge that he'd stood for something, that he'd been the kind of man his sister would have needed, the kind of man who made freedom necessary. Tomorrow, he'd sign papers for the new land. Next month, he'd buy 2 more mares from Sam's stock. By fall, he'd have the foundation of something real and lasting. And someday, maybe, a woman in Chicago would look west and know that her courage had built more than just her own freedom. For now, that was enough, more than enough. It was right. Summer had painted the Wyoming grasslands gold when the letter arrived. Ethan recognized the handwriting immediately, though the postmark was different. St. Louis this time, not Chicago. He opened it standing in his yard, surrounded by the improvements the past months had brought. New fence posts, a larger corral, the beginning of a second barn. The Paulson property had proven even better than hoped, with a spring that ran clear even in dry weather. Dear E, I write this from a hotel overlooking the Mississippi River. Such a strange journey life takes us on. I'm traveling west, not to Wyoming, but to California. Mrs. Hartley has a sister in San Francisco who runs a larger establishment, and she's offered me a position as head seamstress, and can you imagine? Me, with a position of responsibility, but I find myself taking the long way, unable to board the direct train. Something pulls me back, if only to see the mountains once more from a distance. Perhaps it's foolishness. Perhaps it's gratitude. Perhaps it's something else entirely that I dare not name. I'll be passing through Cheyenne on the 15th of this month. Just passing through, you understand. But if a certain rancher happened to be in town that day, perhaps for supplies or business, and if he happened to be near the station around noon, well, coincidences do happen. I'm different now, stronger. I've learned to speak up in meetings, to value my own worth. I've even attended lectures at the library. Imagine me, discussing literature and politics with educated folks. But some things haven't changed. I still make biscuits on Sunday mornings, though none taste quite like those I made in a small ranch kitchen while a kind man gave me shelter. Perhaps this letter will miss you. Perhaps you'll be too busy with the ranch. Perhaps it's better if we don't meet. Two people who shared a moment of crisis and nothing more. But I had to try. P. I read about Carson's conviction. 10 years. It feels like justice, though I know the damage he did to others can't be undone. Thank you for ensuring those papers reached the right hands. Ethan read the letter 3 times, his heart hammering. The 15th was only 4 days away. He had no real business in Cheyenne, nothing that couldn't wait. But suddenly, he found himself thinking of supplies he urgently needed, horses that might be for sale, business that simply had to be conducted on that particular day. He spent the next 3 days in a state of nervous energy that amused Sam Henderson greatly. Never seen you fuss so much about going to town, Sam observed, watching Ethan trim his beard for the 3rd time. Must be some important business. Just want to look presentable, Ethan muttered. Uh-huh. This wouldn't have anything to do with a certain young lady, would it? Ethan's silence was answer enough. Well, about time, Sam said, clapping him on the shoulder. Martha's been saying you need a woman's touch around here. Place looks good, but it doesn't look lived in, if you know what I mean. The ride to Cheyenne seemed both endless and too quick. Ethan found himself checking his reflection in store windows, straightening his coat, second-guessing everything. What if she'd changed her mind? What if seeing him brought back bad memories? What if... But then he saw her. She stood on the platform beside a modest trunk, wearing a traveling dress of deep blue wool that fit her properly. Her hair was pinned up under a small hat, and she carried herself with a confidence that hadn't been there before. But when she turned and their eyes met, her smile was exactly as he remembered, transforming her face from pretty to beautiful. Miss Sullivan, he said, touching his hat brim. Mr. Cole. Her voice was warm with something that might have been joy. What a pleasant coincidence. Indeed, happened to be in town on business. Of course, as am I, just passing through. They stood there, drinking each other in, until the absurdity of their formal pretense made them both laugh. You look well, she said softly. The ranch prospers? It does, expanded some, even got a new mare, mysterious gift from a friend. How fortunate, her eyes sparkled. And Moses? Fat and happy, though still devoted to anyone who feeds him. I'm glad, she paused, then added, I'm glad about all of it. That you're well, that the ranch grows, that you weren't. She stopped, started again. Carson's men, did they? Nothing I couldn't handle, and they're scattered now, looking for new work. Torrance even apologized in his way. Bill Torrance apologized? Her eyes widened. Will wonders never cease? An awkward silence fell. Around them, the bustle of the station continued, people coming and going, living their lives, while two people who'd shared an extraordinary moment tried to find ordinary words. Your train, Ethan said finally. No, when does it leave? Not until evening, I thought. That is, I hoped we might talk, perhaps over lunch, if you have time. I have time. They found a respectable restaurant near the station. Over the meal. She told him about her life in Chicago, the work, the friends she'd made, the independence she'd carved out. He told her about the ranch, the changes in the valley, the way people still talked about the night Carson fell. They've made you a hero, she said, smiling. The man who stood up to the tyrant. We both know the truth of that. I just held a door open. You're the one who was brave enough to walk through it. I've thought about that night so many times, she said quietly. If you hadn't stopped, if you'd ridden past like any sensible man would have. Don't, he said roughly. No point in thinking about what didn't happen. No, I need to say this. She leaned forward, intent. You saved my life, Ethan. Not just from the storm, but from a living death. And I left you to face the consequences alone. You left to be free, that was the whole point. Was it? She studied his face. Was that the only point? The question hung between them, loaded with possibilities. Before he could answer, she continued. I've been free for months now. I've built a life, made my own choices, and do you know what I've discovered? Freedom is wonderful, but it's also lonely. I wake up in my comfortable room, go to my respectable job, come home to my tidy apartment, and I think, is this all? Is this what I ran toward? You're safe, Ethan said, independent, respected, and that's no small thing. No, it's not, and I'm grateful, but... She twisted her napkin in her lap. I find myself thinking about Wyoming, about wide skies and honest work, about a kitchen where I felt more at home in 2 days than I've felt anywhere since. Ethan's heart was pounding again. Lily, I know what you're going to say, that I'm romanticizing, that ranch life is hard, lonely, uncertain, that I'd be foolish to give up a good position for... She trailed off. For what? She met his eyes directly. For a chance, for a maybe, for a man who showed me what decency looks like and a life that feels real instead of just safe. Is that what you want, really? I don't know, she admitted. That's why I'm going to California, not to think, to be sure. But I needed to see you again, to know if what I remembered was real or just the gratitude of a desperate girl. And? It's real, she said simply. Different than I remembered. Better, actually. You're not the savior I painted in my mind. You're just a good man who did a good thing. Somehow, that makes it more, not less. They talked until the afternoon shadows grew long, about everything and nothing. She showed him a photograph of herself with the other seamstresses, all properly dressed and smiling. He told her about the foal born to the sorrel mare, how it had her same white stockings. Finally, inevitably, it was time for her train. At the platform, she turned to face him. I'll write from California and let you know how I find it. I'd like that. And if... She hesitated. If I decided that city life doesn't suit me after all, if I wanted to try something different, would there be a place for me? I don't mean, that is, I wouldn't presume just work, honest work. I'm good with my hands. Getting better with horses, I could earn my way. Ethan thought about his empty house, his quiet evenings, the way Moses still checked the door sometimes as if expecting her return. There'd be a place, he said carefully, if you wanted it, when you wanted it, on whatever terms you chose, even if those terms were complicated, even if I needed time to learn to trust again, to believe that what's freely given won't become chains. Especially then. Her train whistle blew, urgent and final. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, just as she had months ago. But this time, she lingered, her hand on his arm. I'm not promising anything, she whispered. I'm not asking for promises. I know, that's why. She stepped back, smiled. That's why maybe. That's why we'll see. She boarded the train in a swirl of blue wool and determination. Ethan watched from the platform as it pulled away, carrying her toward whatever future she'd choose. But this time was different from watching Tom's wagon disappear into the snow. This time, she was choosing her path freely, with options and resources and strength. And this time, she'd left something behind besides a note. When he returned to his hotel room, he found a package waiting. Inside was a man's shirt, beautifully made from fine cotton with his initials embroidered on the pocket. The note with it was brief. I remembered the measurements from all that mending. Consider this a promise that your shirts will always have holes fixed, if you're willing to wait for the seamstress to find her way home. Ellie. Ethan held the shirt carefully, understanding the message beneath the words. Home. Not Chicago or California, but wherever he was, if she chose it. When she was ready, he folded the shirt and placed it in his saddlebag for the ride back to the ranch. There was work to do, always work on a ranch, but now he'd do it with purpose beyond just survival. He'd build something worth coming home to, whenever she decided what home meant. The sun was setting as he rode out of Cheyenne, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere to the west, a train carried a brave woman toward her future. Behind him lay the past, with all its pain and struggle. And ahead lay possibility, maybe, we'll see. For a man who'd learned to live without hope, it was more than enough. It was everything. Spring came again to Wyoming, melting the snow and awakening the prairie. Ethan worked from dawn to dusk, expanding the ranch, training horses, building for a future that might come or might remain just a dream. Letters arrived from California, not promises, just updates. She was doing well. The work was good. She was saving money. She was thinking. Then, on a day in early April when the wildflowers were just beginning to bloom, she came home. Ethan was in the far pasture, working with a young stallion when Moses started barking. Not his warning bark or his greeting bark, but something altogether different, pure joy. Ethan turned to see a hired wagon rolling up the drive, and his heart stopped. She stepped down carefully, wearing a practical traveling dress and sturdy boots. Her trunk was larger now, and she handled it with the confidence of someone who'd learned to manage her own affairs. When she saw him walking toward her, she smiled, not the tentative smile of their station meeting, but something sure and warm and real. "I thought I'd try it for a year," she said when he was close enough to hear. "California, the position, the city life, all of it. I gave it an honest chance. And I discovered something interesting." She paused to pet Moses, who was beside himself with delight. Success isn't just about safety or money or position. It's about being where you belong, doing work that matters with people who matter. Is that what this is, where you belong? She looked around at the improved ranch, the healthy horses, the garden plot he'd prepared but never planted. "I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out if the offer still stands. Employment, room and board in exchange for honest work. The offer stands." They stood there, a careful distance apart, both understanding that this was a beginning, not a conclusion. There was too much past between them for easy assumptions, too much hurt in her history for simple trust. "I can cook, clean, help with the horses," she said, businesslike now. "I've saved enough to see me through if it doesn't work out. I won't be dependent." "There's the old foreman's cabin," Ethan offered, pointing to a small structure near the main house. "It's rough but sound. You'd have privacy." "That would be perfect." Relief flickered across her face. "I know this is unconventional. Nothing about our acquaintance has been conventional." That earned him a laugh. "No, I suppose not." They settled into a routine over the following weeks. She took over the household management with quiet efficiency, transforming his bachelor establishment into something that felt lived in. Meals appeared on time. Mended clothes materialized clean and pressed. The garden began to take shape under her care. But more than that, she became part of the ranch's rhythm. She learned to read the horses' moods, to predict weather by the feel of the wind, to move through the daily tasks with growing confidence. In the evenings, they'd sit on the porch, she in one chair, he in another, Moses between them, and talk about the day's work, plans for tomorrow, anything but the careful distance they maintained. The neighbors talked, of course. A young woman living on Ethan Cole's ranch, even in separate quarters, was fodder for gossip. But Sam and Martha Henderson made a point of visiting, of including Lily in community gatherings, and their approval carried weight. "She's good for you," Martha told Ethan one Sunday after church. "Both of you walking around like scared cats, afraid to admit what's plain as day. It's not that simple, Martha. Nothing worth having ever is." Summer brought long days and hard work. They fell into partnership naturally. She'd hold a horse while he trimmed hooves. He'd help her carry water for the expanded garden. Sometimes their hands would brush as they worked, and both would pull back, careful to maintain the boundaries that made her feel safe. The change came gradually, a smile that lingered longer, a conversation that drifted beyond work into dreams and memories. The evening she made biscuits and mentioned, casually, that she'd never quite gotten the recipe right until now. The morning he found her teaching the sorrel mare's foal to accept a halter, patient and gentle as he'd taught her. It was late July when the walls finally came down. They'd been working to bring in a hay cutting before a storm, racing against the darkening sky. When the first drops fell, they ran for the barn, laughing and breathless. In the sudden quiet of the hayloft, with rain drumming on the roof, she turned to him. "I've been afraid," she said simply. "Not of you. Never of you, but of trusting again, of believing this could be real. I know. But I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of keeping careful distance from the one person who's never asked anything of me except to be free." He waited, understanding this had to be her choice, her words. "I love this place," she continued, "them, the work, the land, the life we've built, but mostly—" She stepped closer. "Mostly I love the man who made it possible, who saw me at my lowest and offered dignity instead of pity, who's waited all these months without pushing, without demanding, without once making me feel beholden." Lily, let me finish." Her voice was steady now. "Sure. I came here thinking I'd work for a year, save money, move on, keep running, but I don't want to run anymore. I want to build. I want to plant gardens and train horses and make a home, with you if you'll have me. Not as an employee or a burden you're too kind to turn away, but as a partner, an equal, a wife, when we're both ready for that step." Ethan's throat felt tight. "Are you sure?" "I've had a year to be sure, a year of letters and thinking and choosing. I chose to come back. I choose to stay. I choose you, Ethan Cole, if you'll choose me too." He answered by pulling her into his arms, holding her as he'd wanted to since that night in the snow. She fit against him perfectly, her head tucked under his chin, her arms around his waist. "I chose you the night I found you," he said into her hair. "Everything since has just been waiting for you to choose yourself." They were married in September, in the small church in town with Sam and Martha as witnesses. Lily wore a simple dress she'd made herself, blue like the Wyoming sky, nothing like the ruined wedding dress she'd once fled in. When the minister asked if anyone objected, there was only supportive silence. Richard Carson was serving his federal sentence, his empire dismantled, his power broken. The reception was held at the ranch, with neighbors bringing food and good wishes. Tom Henderson, down from Denver for the occasion, pulled Ethan aside. "She looks happy," Tom observed, watching Lily laugh at something Martha had said. "She is happy. We both are. Good. After everything, you both deserved a win." As evening fell and the guests departed, Ethan and Lily stood on their porch now, not his alone. The ranch spread before them in the fading light, larger than when she'd first seen it, but still modest, still requiring work and faith and determination. "No regrets?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "None. You? Only that it took so long to get here." She smiled, leaning into him. Maybe it took exactly as long as it needed to. We both had to choose, remember? Not just once in desperation, but again and again in freedom. Moses ambled over, settling at their feet with a contented sigh. Inside the house, their house, dinner waited, simple but sufficient. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own work. But tonight, they had this, each other, chosen freely, bound by love instead of law or desperation. "I was thinking," Lily said, "about that night you found me, how I had nothing except fear and a ruined dress. And courage. You had courage. Maybe. But look now." She gestured at the ranch, the ring on her finger, his mother's ring, offered and accepted freely. "I have a home, work I love, a husband who sees me as a person, not property, all because you were brave enough to run and I was decent enough to stop. We've been through this." "No," she said softly. "All because you chose me over gold, over safety, over convenience. You chose a stranger's freedom over your own comfort, and that changed everything." "Would you have had me choose differently?" She turned in his arms, looking up at him with those dark eyes that had first caught his attention in a snowstorm. "Never. That choice is what told me who you were. Every choice since has only confirmed it." They went inside as darkness fell completely, Moses padding after them. The house was warm and welcoming, filled with the small touches that made it a home. Curtains at the windows, flowers on the table, 2 chairs by the fire instead of one. Later, as they lay together in the bed that was now theirs to share, Lily traced patterns on his chest with one finger. "I'll make biscuits tomorrow," she murmured sleepily. "The good ones. They're all good ones. Flatterer, but I mean the special ones, and to celebrate." "Celebrate what?" "At being home, being chosen, being free to choose." She yawned, settling closer. "Is that too many things to celebrate with biscuits?" "Never too many things," he assured her, pressing a kiss to her hair. Outside, the Wyoming wind sang across the prairie, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. Inside, 2 people who'd found each other in the worst of circumstances built something beautiful from trust and time and patient love. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be hard winters and dry summers, struggles and setbacks like any life holds. But it was real, and it was theirs. And it was chosen freely by both. And that, Ethan thought as sleep took him, his wife warm in his arms and his future spread before him like an unplanted field, that was worth more than all the gold in the world. In the morning, there would be biscuits. But tonight, there was this, the quiet breathing of the woman he loved, the soft snoring of a faithful dog, and the deep peace of a man who'd chosen right when it mattered most. The young bride who'd once had nothing now had everything that mattered. And the cowboy who'd chosen her over gold had gained something worth far more. A partner. A love. A life built on the solid foundation of doing what was necessary. What was right. What was true. Together they'd made their choice. Together they'd make their way. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.